How are y'all? Guess we can turn that down a little bit. I know that I'm always have the unenviable position of being on, I guess, day 3 of the conference, but I'm tickled to death that so many of y'all are here to talk about sector partnerships when you've been talking about sector partnerships for several days. I also feel like I'm back with my family again. I know so many of y'all here in the room. I've had the pleasure of working with so many of y'all here in the room. So excited to be here with y'all today. And I think we're going to have a good time. Hopefully we all learned something. Hopefully we have a chance to kind of reflect on what we did in round 1, but also thinking about where do we go in round 2. So we all learned a lot in round 1. Some things we liked, some things maybe we would have done differently, and that's okay. I want to give you the space today to think about where do we go next, what worked, what didn't work. This is going to be interactive. I've got a handheld up here. Jerry, I'm coming your way in a second, I'm sure. But I do also want us to learn from each other. No one in round 1, and I mean no one, 11 grantees, no one figured it all out. No one had a perfect sector partnership. I don't think a perfect sector partnership exists, but I think we can learn something from each other as we do this. So that's kind of what we're here for today. Hopefully also to get us motivated for round 2, to get excited, because this is hard work. If you're doing sector partnerships right, it's hard work, it's exhausting work, it's crossing boundaries. When you cross boundaries, life gets a little bit harder. I think most of y'all know me, but my name is Greg Wilson. I work at the Institute of Government at the University of Georgia, and I've had the pleasure of working with the High Demand Career Initiative and sector partnerships and Jamie and the team for going on 5 years now. I was there when the original High Demand Career Initiative idea was birthed. All the way to the report and strategies, and I visited all of y'all in your communities. So it's exciting to kind of be at the end of round 1 and celebrate some success. So that's what we're going to do here today. If I can find my clicker. So what I want to do is we're going to reflect, we're going to learn from each other. I'm going to ask you to share some, and then we're going to figure out where do we go. What do we do? Hey, I really liked what this group did. Can I steal this around 2? Or, hey, this was a really interesting strategy. As we really formulate our work plan for round 2, let's do this. And really figure out where we go from here. Because we can only go forward, we can only go upward as we do this. So this cartoon here, you got the caveman. He's trying to give him wheels. Cavemen say, no thanks, we are too busy. Anybody ever feel this way? I know I do. So today I want to try to press pause. I know your email boxes are probably filling up and your phone's ringing and you've been gone from the office for 3 days and you're probably a little stressed out about how am I going to catch back up on all those emails I've ignored. I want to try to give you permission for the next hour or so to put some wheels on your sector partnership for round 2, to figure out where we're going to go, what worked, what do we want to do from here. So as I mentioned, I've been part of this since the very beginning. Actually, it's really funny. I was reflecting as I was driving down here this morning. I started work on a Monday, and Wednesday I was sent to Albany for a high demand career initiative meeting 5 years ago. So I started my job, and I got dropped straight into this thing. And then I see my friend John Helton here. John was an early adapter and an early guinea pig on this work in Cobb County. Really, I think the model that the states really encouraged folks to do came out of work that John, Cobb Chamber, Rob Garcia, and others really helped to do. I think the state learned a lot. We learned a lot of lessons. I think John would agree. He learned a lot of lessons from that work. We didn't get it all right, but that really helped us to help the state figure out, okay, how do we take sector partnerships and scale it? How do we go from talking about in-demand jobs, in-demand skills, to actually doing something? 16, I had the privilege of going to all 12 regions in a span of 4 weeks. I'll never do that again. Many of y'all were at those workshops. It was a great start to this work. We had all of your partners there. We did some planning. We talked about, we dreamed a little bit. And then that call for grants came out after that. And in 17 and 18, grants were awarded. Then in 18, I had the opportunity to partner with some of my friends up here on the front row, which I really appreciate them sitting on the front row. All y'all in the back row, you're in trouble. I've got John taking names from me as well. But I had the opportunity with my team at the Institute of Government to work with Jerry and Melody and Amy and Sherry and lots of other partners here in the room as well on their High Demand Career Initiative sector partnership grants. So that was a really positive experience as well. And it was really, really kind of good to see the model on the ground and figure out kind of where some of the kinks were in it. Because, you know, I'll say this several times, we don't have it all figured out. No one in the United States has this all figured out. I think we're all learning as we're going, but you know, come end of round 2, we'll be better, and then hopefully there'll be a round 3 one day. End of round 3 will be better from there. And then Jamie mentioned this, I think, on the first day. The Institute of Government had the opportunity to talk with all 11 grantees, figure out what worked, what didn't work, how we all did our work. There was lots of different ways that we did our work, which is good. Lessons learned, challenges, things we would consider doing differently. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and then I understand Jamie's going to be releasing kind of the whole report in the weeks to come about kind of what we learned on that. And that may be a valuable tool as you go forward to kind of get a sense of how each region approached their work and what they did. So I want to show you this chart. Jamie may have showed it to y'all on Wednesday. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. Does anybody recognize this chart? So it may be hard to see, but I'll kind of walk you through it. So what we tried to do was we tried to make sense of, and this is very simplified form, so if I offend anybody in here about your work, I go ahead and apologize right now. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to understand how all 11 grantees approached their work. You know, how do they manage their project? How do they do sector analysis? You know, if they got to kind of next steps, how do they organize their next steps on this? And then, you know, what were some of the main activities? What were some of the main implementation pieces that they were taking on this? Again, you know, trying to fit 11 grantees, $3 million worth of money onto a one-page chart was pretty challenging. But I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of how we approached our work in round 1. The first column you see project management approach. You know, we saw some folks manage the project themselves. You know, they didn't have any kind of outside help on the work. We saw other folks use a local consultant, whether it was a private sector consultant, whether that was a public agency, whether that was a nonprofit, but folks brought in a consultant maybe to help them on that. Sometimes folks went outside of Georgia and they brought in a national consultant. You know, they brought in a different voice to this perspective and trying to leverage that as well. And then, you know, others, as I mentioned, manage the projects internally. Either they had an internal project manager or just a team effort to make that work fit. You know, and there's not one right approach to this. I'm going to come back and I promise I'll talk about project management and capacity building because I think that's something that I'm really passionate about. But I wanted to show you the diversity in how we approach the work. You're going to get tired of me today talking about needs assessments. I think that's what I'm most passionate about in workforce development, which is really sad. Y'all can laugh at me later. But we called this sector analysis. We saw some folks do a really deep needs assessment, and I'll talk about why I think that works. We saw some folks, you know, use a ton of data, which is good. I love data. I love labor market information. We saw other folks do a survey. We saw some folks combine all those or some form of those. So sector analysis is really important because we can't launch into implementation if we don't know what we need to do. And I know as workforce professionals, we think we have a pretty good pulse on what's happening in our community, but we still have to, you know, talk to our partners to figure out what they want, because if not, we may end up in the wrong direction. Next column is organizational structure. How did you carry your work going forward? You know, once you did the needs assessment, once you launched the work, okay, that's great, but we can't just stop with, here are the needs for manufacturing in X part of, you know, Georgia. You know, we put out this report, now others got to figure out what to do, because what's going to happen? If we just publish a needs assessment report, put it on the web and say, success, what's going to happen? Nothing. How are your partners going to feel that are involved in the work and if nothing happens? It's a waste of their time. Are they going to come back next time? No. That's something we need to be careful with in workforce development. And this is true for anything. When I work with groups on strategic planning, I always ask the question at my first meeting before we even start a project, do you intend to actually carry this out? You know, are you just putting together a plan because you have to put together a plan because you need a 5-year plan because you're required to as an organization? We're going to carry this out. Because if you're not going to carry it out, that's not a good use of anybody's time. It really can hurt our credibility in the workforce system. So this organizational structure piece is, okay, we've done the needs assessment, we have a plan, now how do we carry the plan out? Do we have a steering committee? Do we have a chairperson? Do we have working groups? Are we going to meet every quarter? Are we going to meet every 6 months? Do we have a website that's going to help us track our project management approaches? And the last thing is we tried to really talk about, okay, how do you actually implement this? What kind of implementation activities? This is probably the hardest one for us to kind of quantify into a column, but there's things like awareness, strategic plan, a plan that laid out who's going to do what in the next 6 months. We saw some websites launched. We saw some folks really focus on awareness. And I think this last column will continue to grow into round 2. I think I got the sense, talking to all the grantees, was that folks said if I only had 6 or 12 more months, it maybe took us a while to get started on this, but now we're really hitting our stride. And if we had 12 more months, we'd have more to talk about on that. Questions or reactions to this chart? Okay, here we go. Go to slido.com, slido.com. Everybody plays along here with me. If you're not going to talk, that's fine. Go to slido.com. You don't have to download an app. It's completely free. So I want you to go to slido.com and put in the event code SP19. Be lowercase, uppercase, doesn't matter. So go to slido.com and put in the event code SP19. Okay, so once you get to Slido, this first question will appear on your screen. You can just fill out yes or no. So we're going to start with a softball here today. Were you active with a sector partnership effort during round 1? So round 1, I mean the last 2 years, the first grant that came out. Well, that was easy enough. I'm really glad to see that 80% of us were active during round 1. So here's what I want you to do is I want to stop and reflect here for a second. And because this is totally anonymous, I have no clue who's responding. My 80% who were active during round 1, I want you to answer this next question. What worked in round 1? So if we're thinking about round 1, the past 18, 24 months, what worked in round 1 about your sector partnership initiative? So you can just type on your phone, the little text box appears now. Tell us what worked in round 1. You can put in more than one answer too if you want to as well, by the way. But I see a lot of diversity here, which is good. If we all said the same thing, we maybe have some groupthink going on. I'm seeing a lot about meetings here, which is certainly important. That's how sector partnerships are really going to accomplish a lot of the work. I'm tickled to see needs assessments. Someone's playing along with me here today. I see steering committee and leadership up here a lot in different forms. I see kind of defined goals and figuring out where we want to go and not just trying to wing this, but really having a strategy for this. I see business in here. I see engaging stakeholders. I see regular accountability, things like that as well. So I think this is a good list. I'm going to share this with Jamie. Again, it's anonymous, but I think it's maybe helpful to kind of celebrate some more success of what we did that worked well in round 1. So let's go a little negative here now, and let's think about what didn't work in round 1, or what didn't work as well in round 1, or what were some of the challenges we faced in round 1. Acknowledging that this work is really hard. So I'll keep typing, but first thing I'm seeing is industry involvement. We're all here among friends. Who had a hard time getting industry involved in your work? Yeah? I see a lot of hands here. Why do you think that was? Yeah, so I don't see, I've been part of things before. It may not be workforce related, but I've been part of initiatives before, and I don't have enough time to do my job right now. How is this going to help? So they don't see the buy-in. Go ahead. Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, what's in it for me? All of your partners, business, nonprofit, education, yes, they want to be good partners, but at the end of the day, we all have goals and responsibilities and bottom lines and things we have to meet. So, for an employer, is this going to help me fill my talent pipeline? Is this going to help me upskill my current workers? For a partner, is this going to help me enroll more students at our technical college? this going to help me, increase our apprenticeship program enrollment? And I think y'all are right. It's round one was hard, but I think having some tangible progress, being on a show, we did this. I think will help you in round two. Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there are, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit. There are some things that, at least I think, in my opinion, and y'all can throw things at me if you want, that are core to sector partnerships. But also, you've got to figure out what's going to work in your region. Some of y'all have, like I think of Stephanie's region. Stephanie has really two regions in her region. You've got the Carrollton area, and then you've got kind of the Griffin, Noonan area, and that's still pretty hard to get from there. So maybe three regions, Stephanie. And she's not the only region. I think almost every one of y'all, we could probably draw a map of some of the sub-regions in there. So how do we get smarter in round two on that? Certainly we want to take a regional approach to this work, but are there ways to have some, sub-regional working groups? I know Jamie has a name for it. I'm probably not using the official name. But how do we take that approach in round two? Because I heard that from a lot of folks. We heard time constraints. I think time constraints kind of fits into there. I think we've talked about some of the constraints of the grants in round one, and hopefully some of that will be addressed this upcoming round. Again, I'm not the expert on that. What else am I missing that didn't work in round two? What else do you feel especially passionate about that you either want to showcase that didn't work? I don't know who might want to do that, or get feedback from their peers on. Yeah, I mean the match. I'll be honest. The match was a good lesson learned. I think. I think everybody thought it was a good idea in principle. It sounded phenomenal on paper, and what a great way to get our partners involved. And yeah, I mean it didn't get us what we wanted to do, and it turned out to be a real challenge for a lot of folks and a paperwork drill. So I'm glad to see that went away in round two. But I'll tell you that's not a. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here because y'all are here. When Lake Lanier is beautiful right now. I was driving this morning. I'm like, I'm just gonna go over there. Jamie can do this. But just because there's not a match doesn't mean we don't need to engage those folks. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be asking our partners to help support things. It doesn't mean that we can't, that we should be funding this all by ourselves. But at least if we don't have to get that kind of paperwork. Because as y'all continue this work and more and more partners see value, they're going to ask you, hey, Greg, how can we help? We have a foundation. Hey, we got this grant, and we think this grant could be helpful from this, or and we've been doing this training program for a long time. Can we retool it to meet what you're trying to do? We want to get behind this work. So I think keeping the spirit going is going to be really important. Certainly time constraints, but that's all of our work. I think that's just inevitable. We're always so busy. We're always being asked to do more with less people. Certainly that's part of this as well. So let me share a few of the reflections. Let me share a few of the reflections that I had from talking to all 11 grantees. Well, first thing I'll tell you is that we learned a lot. We've already hit on several things that we've learned in this, but I think the team at OWD, I think the team from the Institute of Government who's been working on this for 5 years, I think everybody here in this room learned a lot. And we've been piloting this thing for a number of years now, but I think we're still learning as we're going through that, and that's okay. I think we really start to see, especially towards the last 6 months or so, about how sector partnerships can be a powerful tool for doing our work. I think really, I would argue, and I don't know if you all agree with me, but I'd argue that for the workforce system, for workforce development, sector partnerships are going to be how we're carrying out a lot of our work going forward. That as our funding streams change and all that sector partnerships is an effective strategy for us to move forward with. That working with our partners in such a deep way is going to be what the next 5 years looks like in workforce. I could be wrong on that, but I'd probably wager a little bit on that. When I looked at all 11 grants and looked at kind of what was the differentiator between those that really were able to get to where they wanted to get to, or those that made progress quickly, was doing a true deep needs assessment. If you walk away with nothing else from today, I want you to walk away thinking about in round two, do we need to do a true deep needs assessment? Especially if you're sticking with the same sector. If you didn't do a deep needs assessment in round one, I really want to push you to press pause, stop, not start over, but really make sure that you're going in the right direction. those that talk to industry in a substantive way, plus data, had the most success in round one. Because what that meant was they were delivering what industry wanted. They were delivering to meet top needs. And you've got to do both those things together. So I really saw that those that did a needs assessment were really able to move the furthest on this. So I'm not going to have you raise your hand. I'm not going to call out that. But I really want to push you. That needs assessment piece, yes, it's hard to do a needs assessment. Yeah, it's hard to get your partners in the room and get the HR people all to get there at the same time, but it really does pay off. I think another thing that we learned in round one, and I kind of saw this in some of your responses, was it took longer to get these off the ground than we started. Anybody else experience that? Yeah, I think most of our grantees, took them longer to get the grant, took them longer to put out an RFP if they were procuring services, it took them longer to get their partners to the table. I think that was a surprise for round one for everybody. I'm very hopeful in round two that because we're already used to doing this work, our muscle memory is good. We can move faster on that. But I think as you think about round two, hopefully you're already having conversations on how can we move faster. If we've got to do an RFP, is the RFP ready to go? Are there ways for us to move fast? Because one of the things that was an aha for me talking to some of the grantees was, this work started in 2016. We were in communities in fall 2016 talking about the Sector Partnership Grant. The grants were awarded, some in 2017, some late in 2017. Some folks had gone 6 months or a year between that first meeting, getting a letter of support, and actually starting the work. So we had to kind of reintroduce ourselves sometimes and say, remember this thing you committed to a year ago that's going to be really transformational for our community? Oh yeah, come on, we're going to get started now. So I think that was something that's just, and that's not unique to sector partnerships. We have a lot of rules in our system, which is good. We need that accountability, but maybe we can think about how we get a little faster in round two. Consultants, project managers, facilitators, whatever term we want to use, I think are really important. But I think one thing I really want to push you on in round two is how do we build capacity? It's phenomenal that the state is putting the kind of money that's put into sector partnerships, but that may not continue forever. How do we build our capacity and our staff to do this work ourselves? How do we learn from consultants and project managers and project facilitators, or whatever term we want to use for folks that helped us? How do we build our own capacity? How do we get our business services staff ready to lead round three? How do we bring some of this work in-house? And I'm saying this as someone who's served as a project facilitator for groups, is that I want our workforce boards in our regions to build capacity to do this work. Because at some point, this is going to be how we're going to do business. And there's not going to be special money to do this work, because this is going to be an expectation of being a workforce board in Georgia. So just think about that. How do we build capacity? And then anytime, whether it's a sector partnership, whether it's career services, whether it's your one-stops, whether it's any kind of grant money or person you're procuring services for, we also have to manage the contractor. We can hire great contractors, but if they don't know exactly what you want, if you're not managing them, you may not get what you want. So really thinking about how do we manage those that are helping us in round two. And that doesn't just apply to sector partnerships. That applies to all of our contracts we have now under WIOAs. How are we managing these? How are we monitoring them? How are we making sure that we're getting exactly what we want from our contractor? And then I've hit on this several times, but okay, we've done the needs assessment, we've done the plan, we've done the listening. Now we've got to move to implementation. Because that's really when you start to build credibility. I mean, Stephanie said when the website launched, they finally got it. And that's what we're talking about here is we've got to move to implementation, and we'll talk about that some more here in a little bit. So I know this has been hit on a little bit. I promise I'm not going to go back. Y'all, if you've been with me on this journey, you've heard me talk about this a lot. But I think in looking at round one, there was some confusion on what a sector partnership is. So for those that have been with me, just excuse me here for just 2 minutes. I promise I'll get to more meaty stuff. But when we think about what a sector partnership is, I think there's 3 elements to a sector partnership. This comes from our federal WIOA legislation. But the first thing is that sector partnerships are convened by or acted in partnership with a local board. I think this is really important, especially as we think about doing this long term. Either the local workforce board convenes the sector partnership or it's in partnership with them. So what does that mean? That means that maybe you're convening this with your Chamber of Commerce. Maybe you have a regional chamber. Maybe that regional chamber has better relationships than we do as a workforce board. Well, that's okay. How do we leverage that? But you know, it can be done in partnership with other organizations. So it doesn't have to be us just doing this work by ourselves. So who is a sector partnership? It organizes key stakeholders in an industry cluster. So again, we're focused on one industry cluster. Most grantees chose manufacturing. There was some healthcare. Metro Atlanta had a few others, so did Region 12 in the coastal area. But you're choosing one industry cluster and focusing on that. And then what do you do? I think this is the piece that I think is really important, is okay, we have a sector partnership, we've done our meetings, now what do we do? It's focusing on the shared goals and human resources needs of the industry cluster. So it's asking yourself the question, have we done the analysis? Now how do we help close these gaps? Our business partners, our partners in this have floated these 5 issues, are the 5 issues we need to address. How do we do that? That right there is what a sector partnership is all about doing, is your industry partners float the top issues they need help addressing from a workforce, from a human resources perspective, and then this sector partnership, this group of employers and educators and workforce development and government and everybody turns their attention to that, you know, work list right there. That's really important. I think sometimes we miss that. So you do your needs assessment. Here are the top 5 things we need to address to make this industry work in this region. And then the sector partnership then pivots and goes to attack that list. We can't start with the solution at the beginning of the sector partnership. I'll say that again. We can't start with the solution at the beginning of the sector partnership. All we can do in the sector partnership is start and do a needs assessment and figure out what are those top 5 issues. And then we pivot. So as you think about round 2, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but y'all just excuse me again for a minute. You know, as you start round 2, what are those top 5 issues? And then how do we address those top 5 issues? I think thinking like that is going to really let you really take round 2 and supercharge this into places that we've never been before. That sounds really corny, but I've seen this work over and over. So think about it that way. Needs assessment, then how do we attack those top issues that come out of the needs assessments? So what is a sector partnership? My friend over here said everyone's different, and I agree with that. Your region looks different, your partners are different, your resources are different, your geography is different, the number of people you have and where they are spread out is different, but there's some things that are core to a sector partnership. So the first thing is the convener. We've talked about this. I'd love to see it be the workforce board, but don't let your desire to be the convener slow down the work. If you've got someone else in your region who's going to be a great convener, we'll have them do that. The needs assessment. Y'all have heard enough about that. We're going to come back to that again, I promise. You have this implementation plan to close those gaps. So we heard that we need to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, who's going to do X, Y, and Z? Jerry's going to do this in 3 months, Melody's going to do this in 3 months, and Caroline's going to do this in 5 months, and really trying to put names to that plan. And then you have working groups that are working on those top 3, top 5 pieces and running with those. And then you can't just launch the plan and hope that it comes to fruition. It's this cycle of accountability. It's every quarter, every 3 months, every 6 months, the entire group gets back together. The working groups may be working throughout that cycle. If you've got a working group that's addressing X and a working group on Y, they'll work on their own time together. But you got to beat the drum in this work to really get what you want to happen. You got to have employer involvement and leadership. You got to have your other partners there as well. And then you got to have some kind of project management supports. And what I mean by that is that, as y'all allude to, our employers are really busy. Even if you have an employer leading your work, they're going to need a lot of help to do this work successfully. So someone on your staff to take minutes, someone on your staff to distribute calendar invites, someone to find meeting space, kind of those small things that really make a big difference in this kind of work. someone to make sure and show up an hour early to get that room set up and turn the coffee pot on so that when everybody else shows up, they have this perfect experience. Those are my core elements. What else do you think is core to a sector partnership in Georgia? You want to try to answer that question first?
The same group that was here the other day. You done heard this, but it was kind of the same thing. But the needs assessment meeting was probably the most important one we had in our group. And what we found was, you're right, ours is healthcare. And you're not gonna have the HR department with one hospital call the HR department of another hospital, hey, we've got these problems, what are y'all doing? If they answer, they're not gonna be honest about it because they're in competition with each other. But it was amazing how when you get everybody at the table and you're just discussing what are your needs, what are your wants, the guards kind of come down and they start talking to each other. And they realize that there's common needs that they have that maybe if they work together, they can solve these needs or come up with solutions.
Talk about how you connected with Phoebe and how you had some help there.
There again, this is one of those, we started out knocking on doors, let's explain who we are, let's explain what we're doing, please come to a meeting, and it was tough, it was really tough. And actually we had Pat Horton, what's the organization she's with?
Georgia Hospital Association.
Okay. She came to Phoebe to have it looked like the UN they had in there, this big room. And I went to just kind of offer what little bit of support I could. And she started talking about HDCI and what we were doing. And Tracy Suber sitting right next to me. She's with Phoebe. And she had her arms crossed. You could tell she really wasn't, interested in much of this. But then we got to talking about one of the things we're doing is we're getting the right people at the table. And we've got like hospitals at the same table with the technical schools. And they're able to explain to the technical schools, this is the curriculum we want to see. And she says, so you actually get to tell them what you want? And I said, yeah. She says, can I be a part of this? Then it just grew, right? Am I right? And then it's just grown and grown. Katie Brown here with Andrew College, they're not even in our region. But after the needs assessment meeting, she saw on the news where we had what we were doing, and she contacted someone and asked could she be part of the group. Now she chairs one of our subcommittees. But you get the whole thing, and I use this for other things than just this, but getting the right people at the table and getting them to talk to each other. Kind of our mantra was, we don't know what we don't know. And then you get at the table and you think, my gosh, I thought somebody else was handling this. You mean nobody's dealing with this? Well, let's talk about it. But that's, did I answer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me try to, well, if I were you, I would I'd take my friendly Convention and Visitors Bureau director. I understand he's pretty good at his job. And I would take him along and see if he can't set up meetings with the HR managers at Sea Island and the Westin and the Jekyll Island Club. Because they're going to have, that CVB director is going to have credibility that no one else can have. It's like when Pat Horton came and sat down with Phoebe, when GHA came down and said they want to talk about workforce, well, Phoebe really wanted to engage that point because there was a lot of credibility with that. So is there someone who you can take along with you to say, this is really important for our community, we need some help to break through? Tracy, I want to give you a chance to jump in here.
The other thing I was going to say too is I think it's really important if you could, and I don't know because I know you're talking about lots of different places, but if you could identify at those places people who are just as passionate about this as you are, and I don't know if you're able to do that or to identify, but I think that it really is about, it is about having the right people there, because if you have the right people there, they're going to get involved because they're compelled to. They feel like they need to, and I think that's kind of what happened in our area is that we just happened to be in a situation where we had the right people there, and it will happen. You just you've got to figure out who they are.
And having a few that'll lend credibility to your work is really important. In Southwest Georgia, for instance, having Phoebe at the table gave a lot of credibility to this work because Phoebe is the largest healthcare employer in Southwest Georgia. So if Phoebe wants to be involved in this, then okay, maybe I should be involved in it too. So maybe just mean getting a few folks on board and going from there. You don't have to have 30, maybe just be 3 and starting with that. Susan, you want to add something there?
I was just going to say, in the Athens area, we were one of the really late starters. I think we got our grant late in 2017, and I didn't even start working until just a little over a year ago. And the needs assessment, we did spend, in fact, I was a little confused and thought round 1 really was about the needs assessment. So we spent a long time with that and talked one-on-one more than we did in a group. Like I went out and met with people. Also, I was trying to learn what I was doing, so that was helpful. But to your point about getting connected with Phoebe or someone, there was an opportunity, and we just jumped on it to get connected with a Georgia Power effort locally, and they already had an executive group running. And so from the needs assessment and from the people who were participating in that, I had an idea of who would be willing. So we handpicked sort of an advisory group, which is how Caterpillar got here. And we're all new to it, but I can tell you we've met twice, and that's all. Our group has met. And we've laughed and laughed the last 2 days because we truly, authentically came up with the importance and the need for internships and apprenticeships and teacher externships. It felt like original ideas, and then we've seen it repeated here. And so, but we did our work, and we had consensus, and we know where we're going. And so it was, I guess it's been validating, but we have laughed that, yeah, we thought of that. And clearly other people have too. And so I think it is important to get attached to something where you can read. I handpicked who's on that committee, and they're all engaged.
And starting small. And it's you may not get 15 at the first meeting, but if you have the right 3 people there, it's amazing what that can do. Amy, you want to add one more thing on this before we move on?
Just real quick, you had talked about how to engage people. When I first started, of course, we've got 18 counties in Southern Georgia. So I really use my connections, use your networks, because I don't know everybody in every business. So reach out to the chamber, find out who they know at those organizations, and then ask for an introduction. Because if I go cold call, they might not answer. But if somebody they know does,
But you also went and sometimes you just stopped by the chamber offices and
I did.
and
I
asked,
knocked on doors.
And I think sometimes we send an email, we don't get a response, and we say, okay, they don't want to be part of this. Well, they may not know what it is, so you may have to get someone else to explain what it is. You may have to just go show up at the chamber, or I think you showed up at the HR office one time for a healthcare employer and said, this is what HCCI is, who do I talk to about this? And yeah, that can be weird. That's not something that I would love to do, but that's sometimes how you get this work off the ground, especially getting those kind of core believers. Tom, and then I'm going to move on, I promise.
Just for Glenn County specifically, touch base with the Golden Isles College and Career Academy. Rick Townsend, they're a career academy. They already have partnerships set up with Gulfstream. They have partnerships set up with King and Prince and whatever that big seafood house is over there. Okay, those partnerships are already set up. You might come in the back door through the College and Career Academy and kind of ride on their coattail with those partnerships.
So I think you're exactly right there, is that you may not have to create something new. Workforce development work is not, this past 2 years is not the first time we've been doing workforce development work in the state of Georgia. We've been at this for a long time. It may be called different things, so you may not have to create something new. You may just leverage a sector partnership right on top of some of the work that's already happening, or there's already a workforce committee of the chamber that has 5 industries on it. Well, can you be the awesome volunteer who says, I'm going to help organize the hospitality subcommittee of this chamber working group? So it may not be having to have your own group, but can we leverage the work of somebody else? I'm always work smarter, not harder, and if someone else can help me do the work, that's great. So a needs assessment. Y'all have that sector partnership guide. I think some folks have a ton of them. But a needs assessment, again, I'm a broken record here, that really differentiated those that really kind of went a long way and those that are still working through it. So it's labor market data, plus a needs assessment meeting. It could be an interview. It could be a survey. Surveys are hard to get responses on. I wouldn't. I always discourage folks from doing surveys unless you're really going to do the survey in a professional way, but you're talking big money, really big money there. So it's getting folks around the table. It's going and calling on them. And usually it's like 4 or 5 questions we're asking. What are your hardest jobs to fill today? What jobs do you think you're going to have a hard time filling the next 5 years, next 10 years? As you think about retirement and kind of where you are in your facility, what skills are you lacking in your entry-level talent? Is it hard skills? Is it soft skills? What kind of workforce issues are you facing as a company? And then this magic question of what can we do to help? And a lot of times employers can be blown away when you ask these questions, and we listen, but we have to listen. I've seen this when we first started this work in Cobb. It's been long enough now. I think I can tell the story, John. And it wasn't even John. It was one of the school systems. They wanted to I forget what sector it was. It may have been construction or engineering. And some firms are talking about, the schools aren't doing anything on this. They're not teaching this skill. And the folks from the school system wanted to jump out of their chair and say, well, yes, we do this, and this is in our curriculum, and we have STEM programs and all this and that. And that's not what a needs assessment is. There'll be time for that later to defend yourself and figure out what's missing and all that. But a needs assessment is about those partners listening. So that's really, really important. So let's talk about how this all kind of fits together. So you got your needs assessment. So what did our employers tell us? What's important? Do all of our stakeholders understand what's important? And then after you do your needs assessment, you do some analysis and synthesis. I'll show you a project plan here in a second that may be helpful and kind of shows you how this may work in a sector partnership. So you do your needs assessment, you analyze your data, you talk to your employers, you have your meetings, and then your next step is, okay, so what? What did we hear? What did we learn from this? Were there common needs? Did one company have this need over here that wasn't common to anything else? Okay, maybe that's a whole other problem. It's not a workforce problem. Maybe it's a pay problem. Always be careful there. And then plan development. What are we going to do? Keep it simple. For groups, I always encourage no more than 3 or 4 priorities. Yes, we're ambitious people, but everybody doing this work, minus maybe a consultant or a project coordinator, is really a volunteer. They have full-time jobs, they have families, they have other commitments. So instead of trying to do 15 things, are there 3 things that we can do well, and then we can come back. And if we fill all 3 of those things, then we'll come back in 2 years and build 2.0. Let's do 3 things and wow everybody's socks off, and then we'll go forward on this. So let's get really ground level here, and I'll show you kind of a hypothetical kind of project plan for a sector partnership. Again, this isn't the only way to do it, but I'll show you kind of a way that I've found that works pretty well. So here you see kind of the 3 phases of you see the 3 phases of a sector partnership. So phase 1 is planning. So even before you get to your needs assessment, even before you have that first meeting, it's planning. That's when you're going and calling on folks and saying, hey, we want to do this work. That's when you're gathering your data. That's when you're asking your chamber and your economic development folks, hey, we're going to be working in aerospace in this region. Who do we need to be talking to? Who's having workforce issues? So that planning phase can take several months. And you got to have enough time for planning before you move into needs assessment. In your needs assessment, you're going to have kind of your needs assessment convening. Bring in 5, 10 employers that kind of represent the diversity of the industry. Ask them all to make 5 to 10-minute presentations around what are your top needs. What jobs are hard to fill now? What jobs are hard to fill in the future? And do those all one after another. It tends to work really well in an hour and a half. You've got a pretty good snapshot of what are the issues of X industry and what are some of those common needs from there. And then you move into your analysis. So we've done our listening over here. Now we're going to do our analysis. We're going to develop our plan. We heard it's X, Y, and Z. Okay, how are we going to do X, Y, and Z? Who's responsible? How are we going to know if we're successful on that? And then you move into implementation. And you see this right here. Basically, this is kind of a process for this. Your whole group meets, work teams meet. Whole group meets, work team meets. And you just keep doing that over and over and over until you finish all of your work, and then you go back to the drawing board and create round 2.0. It's not super sexy, it's not exciting, but this is how groups get this kind of work done. Is folks, you've developed the plan, folks are bought in on the plan, and then you go. So I've talked a lot about implementation, but I think the one thing I want to encourage you on though too is be flexible. You have the plan, you have the document, but you may find out 6 months in that something is a higher priority and we need to pivot that way. Or you may find out that the one priority sounded really good until you got into implementation and you realize that, yeah, this is not on the docket for this time, and that's okay. Just because it's printed doesn't mean it has to be set in stone, so have some flexibility. You're going to have transitions, and the only thing that's inevitable in workforce is transitions. You may have a great employer champion, and guess what? What do? They take a new job. Ever have that before? You got this one person who's your ambassador to your sector, and they take a new job. They get promoted. They get moved to a new site. They're told, we need you to focus on this for the next 18 months, and then you're dead in the water. So be flexible. Be thinking about that. So I've got a few minutes here before we wrap up, and I want to talk about kind of round 2. So we've talked a lot about round 1. I've alluded a little bit to round 2, but some considerations for round 2. First thing I want you to think about is lessons learned from round 1. Things that I've talked about here today, did anything resonate with you? Can you take it back to your team to figure out where to go from there? You got to ask yourself the question, I think you all have already figured this out, new sector or same sector? We could spend all morning talking about that, but the one thing I want to say here, if it's new sector, how do we approach this with a new lens of this work? If it's the same sector, what do you need to do differently in round 2? Do we need to make any course corrections? Do we need to go back out there and rebuild support? Do we need to go back out there and re-engage folks? Do we need to go back out there and tell them, here's how we're going to do things a little differently in round 2 because we didn't exactly get everything we wanted done in round 1? Capacity building. I mentioned this before, but I really want to push you all to ask yourself the question of how do we build the capacity of our organization to do this work internally going forward? It's great, there's grant money for this right now, but we all know that grants come and go. But if we get our folks trained with some of these competencies and skills, then you can do this on the cheap going forward. We got to get business involved in this. That was one of the things we heard from a lot of different grantees was we had a hard time getting business involved. We've heard that here this morning. So it may not be getting everybody involved, but making sure you have the right folks at the table. Project management and needs assessment, we've talked about those ad nauseum here this morning. And then, I really want you to think about how do we achieve results? The workforce system is probably one of the best kept secrets in the state of Georgia, which is really a shame. It's not how it should be. I think sometimes we don't like talking about ourselves. It's the client's success, it's the partner's success. But for this work to build credibility, to get that snowball getting bigger and bigger, anything that y'all do that's creating success, tell folks about it. There's some awesome things already happening out of round 1 that we need to be telling our communities that a group of employers in education and nonprofits and government are working together around a strategy, and here's some of the things they're already doing. We got to tell folks that. We're not good at communicating in the system, but communicating our successes is going to add credibility to our work. Success is magnetic, especially with employers. A lot of times they may be hesitant to get involved at first because it's another initiative fatigue. But if they're hearing you're doing some really neat things, yeah, I want to be part of that. Where do I sign up for that? And then think about sustainability. We were very lucky to get a round 2 of grants. I hope there's a round 3 and a round 4, but there may not be. How can we do this work with no money? We are experts in the workforce system of doing things on a shoestring budget, but let's start thinking ahead and thinking about how do we do this with no money? Or how does this work change when we hit a recession? Knock on wood. Things look okay right now, but we're double the length between the average expansion on average to where we are right now. So recession's inevitable. So how do we sustain this work? Once our project manager money goes away, how do we keep this going? Because we don't just want to say in 2 years, oh, the money went away, this work is no longer important. What's that going to do to your partners? Okay, so we're doing this, we got great work, we're making a difference. Okay, the money goes away, let's stop doing this. I wouldn't want to come back to the table after that, because there'll be money again one day, so how do we sustain it with no money? Let's start thinking about that in round 2. It may not be the Cadillac deluxe version, but is there a way to keep living even when we have to cobble together a few dollars here and there to make this happen? I think one thing we can all do differently in round 2 is think about some metrics. Think about how we're communicating our success. How do we know we're making a difference? What are some of those measures that our work is impacting? This is really hard. Folks across all different industries, across government, across the foundation world, measuring your work that you do is difficult, especially in a collective impact model, which is similar to what a sector partnership is. How do we do that? But we have to do this. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we can't do it. So I really want you to think about, how do we track some measures? How do we know if we're making a difference? How do we know if all this time and money we're spending is making things better in our region around this workforce? So think about that, because that's really important. We're not going to get more money if we can't communicate the success we're making. There's not going to be a round 3 if after round 2 we don't know that we're changing this measure and this is going in the right direction. So population measure would be the entire population as a whole. You are not responsible for the unemployment rate in your region. You are not responsible for the workforce participation rate in your region, because that's a macro issue. Certainly the work that we do here impacts that, but are there population measures, big picture measures that our work is driving towards? So that's what I want to say, population measure. But a program measure is what we're tracking for our work. So say our sector partnership creates a new soft skills curriculum for healthcare, for high schoolers in healthcare. Okay, well that's great. How do we have a measure of if that's working? So are we going to count it? Yeah, that may be one way to do it. Are we going to see how many students actually do it? Yeah, I think it's good. But then the question of, okay, well so what? How do we have measures for our key signature programs so we can go and talk about that? There's kind of 3 key questions I love for performance measures. So the first one, and this is from results-based accountability. If you haven't heard of results-based accountability, it's awesome. I'm hoping that is going to be something that Jamie will be bringing to you all in the years to come. We've chatted about that. But results-based accountability is a way of how do we take these really tough challenges like sector partnerships and really achieve some progress. The first question we ask is, well, how much did we do? We're counting. We had X number of people served. We had X number of partners show up. We had X number of hours contributed towards this work. We had X number of students go through the training program. Second question we ask is we're getting a little more specific, is how well do we do it? That's things like efficiency. That's things like outcomes. Did a student, so we had 100 students enroll in the program. How much did we do? How well did we do it? Well, how many finished it? How many went through the entire curriculum? So that's the second piece. And then the third piece, and the most difficult question of all that vexes evaluators, vexes program managers, is anyone better off? So we're going to do another 2 years of work on sector partnerships. Is anybody better off? Are we changing lives? Are we helping our employers? Are we helping our communities? Are we making that impact? If we can answer the first question, we're doing good. I think we can all answer the first question in round 2. I think we can all answer the second question in round 2. Third question may be a little bit more difficult, but I do think that's where we have to push towards. And I think this will be a professional development topic going forward, is really thinking about applying some performance measures to our work. Not the WIOA performance measures, but ones that y'all develop as sector partnerships that will be meaningful in your region. Let me get in one more plug here and then we'll take some questions. So the Institute of Government is planning 2 workforce development conferences this fall. So not just WIOA or sector partnership specific, but especially if you're in the sector partnership world, you're going to want to be at one of these. Because as we well know, one of the biggest challenges of workforce development, that date's wrong. August 22nd. Yeah, thank y'all. But we are planning 2 conferences, and what we want to do is we want to break down some silos. We still have we're doing a lot better than we were 5 years ago in working together. But we want to bring together K-12, post-secondary, WIOA, government, nonprofits, business, economic development for a day of learning and networking together to figure out how do we move forward on this. Learning from speakers here in the state of Georgia, but also bringing in some national voices and really just trying to add some more energy and ideas to this. And hopefully we can all learn from each other and you really get cross boundaries. As y'all are taking photos of this, I do want to note that I just learned that our little handout right here has the wrong date on it. It's actually August 22nd, 2019 in Tifton. And you can go to cvog.uga.edu/Tifton or /Gwinnett, all lowercase. So our Tifton conference is going to have a real rural workforce development flavor. So if you're part of rural Georgia, maybe even not in South Georgia, but if you're struggling with the rural issue, we're really going to spend a lot of that conference looking at rural workforce development. At our Gwinnett conference on September 26th, we're going to be talking about transitions. So how do we transition a young adult from high school to post-secondary? How do we transition someone from education to career? We still lose a lot of people as we go from one touch point to the next. So how do we plug those gaps? Who's doing good work in that space? What are ideas and strategies that we can do for that? So with that, we've got less than 5 minutes. I'm curious about some questions. Any questions, sir?
I just wondered through all this, when do we talk about low income levels and how they've been slashed for who qualifies for on the WIOA side of things?
Sure.
And just take any input, because it is a narrow window of who we can help, and that just needs to be out front with all employers in some ways, that here's the folks, and that's measuring that along the way. How do you measure that? Just that's hypothetical as far as just a...
I mean, so certainly eligibility is a challenge. I mean, I think we all struggle with eligibility on that side. But the beauty of sector partnerships is that WIOA is just one tool. Our ITA money, our various funding sources, that's just one tool in the toolbox. If you've got a sector partnership that has everybody at the table, you may be able to help these with your money. The technical college has money for this. Maybe you've got some business partners who put up money for a scholarship for someone else who falls into this range. So I think that's the beauty of the sector partnership, is that we can really leverage more resources than we could with just our WIA dollars. But I acknowledge the challenge around eligibility. I think we all live that. Amy?
Learning, having the employers at the table, like we learned that Greg at his hospital, they pay for schooling. Anybody that wants to go from like their LPN to their RN, they'll pay for it. And we learned that by bringing them at the table. And so we can assist in other ways. Maybe the people that are in the CNA program and want to continue, then we can help with our dollars, but he's got dollars he can use too, so.
Yeah. Great. Other questions here? We overwhelmed? Is anybody feeling encouraged around round 2? Y'all, round 1 was good, but I'm going to be really excited to see where we are in round 2. We've learned a lot in round 1. We've all made some mistakes. We're ready to go. Hopefully you leave today recharged and ready to go back and sit down with your team in the weeks to come to figure out, I really like what they're doing. I'm going to steal that from them, and I really like this, and we need to change this, and we need to press pause on that. I encourage y'all just to keep moving. Sector partnerships are really where we're going to make a difference in the years to come in workforce. Sector partnerships are going to be a way of how we elevate our workforce boards and our partners in this work. And what a great way to just reach out and engage our partners and have a real structure for that. So I just want to encourage you to go out there and do it. If I can be a resource, feel free to use me, use Brittany, use Jamie, use John. As you face hurdles, I encourage you to talk to Jamie and the team early on. don't let those issues fester. Jamie and the team has a lot of experience on this, and they've probably dealt with the same exact issue that you're going through. So don't wait 6 months to say, hey, we're still stuck where we were 6 months ago, because the state wants you to succeed in this work. Use it as a resource. Use me as a resource. Happy to help you all. And why don't we call it a day? Thank y'all.